Picture the height of human achievement. A civilization so advanced, its palaces had running water when the rest of Europe was still in the Stone Age. A society so peaceful, it built no walls, its art celebrating not conquest, but the grace of dolphins and the sacred dance with bulls. This was the Minoan world on Crete, a golden age that shone brightly for centuries. And then, in a single cataclysmic day, it was extinguished. Not by war or plague, but by an enemy from the earth itself. This is the story of how a superpower was erased from the map, and the terrifying warning it leaves for us today. The year is 1900. British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans arrives on Crete, armed with a shovel and a Greek myth. The legend spoke of a tyrannical king, Minos, and a monstrous half-man, half-bull, trapped in an inescapable labyrinth. To Evans, it was just a story. But then, his team broke ground. The soil gave way to something impossible. Not simple ruins, but a sprawling, multi-leveled palace complex. Corridors snaked in bewildering patterns, leading to grand courtyards, royal apartments, and workshops. Rooms were stacked upon rooms, in a confusing, brilliant architectural maze. Evans had found it, the real labyrinth. But the true shock wasn't its size, it was its character. This was no grim fortress. The walls were alive with color, frescoes of leaping athletes, serene goddesses, and oceanic life. He named these people the Minoans. Yet the palace was a ghost town. The people were gone. Their exquisite pottery was shattered, their wealth abandoned. The central mystery was born. What could possibly have forced them to abandon this paradise? He had found the source of the myth, but the truth he uncovered was more terrifying than any minotaur. To understand their disappearance, we must first understand their glory. At their peak, around 1600 BCE, the Minoans were the undisputed masters of the Mediterranean. Their fleet was their fortress, controlling trade from Greece to Egypt and bringing unimaginable wealth to Crete. Their capital, Knossos, was a marvel of engineering. A complex system of clay pipes provided running water and even flushing toilets. Light wells channeled sunshine deep into the palace interior, filling its halls with a golden glow. Vast storage magazines held enormous ceramic jars, filled with oil, wine, and grain. The wealth of a thalassocracy, a sea empire. But their art tells the most compelling story. In a violent age, Minoan frescoes are strikingly peaceful. They depict athletes vaulting over charging bulls in sacred ritual, elegant priestesses presiding over ceremonies, and dolphins playing in tranquil seas. There are no images of a king trampling his enemies, no monuments to bloody conquest. Their power seemed to flow from commerce, artistry, and a deep reverence for nature. Yet a profound silence hangs over this vibrant world. We can see their lives, but we cannot hear their voices. Their written language, Linear A, fills thousands of clay tablets with records and accounts. But unlike the hieroglyphs of Egypt, its code has never been broken. They are a civilization speaking to us in pictures, their true stories locked away in a language we cannot understand. As archaeologists dug deeper at Knossos and other Minoan sites like Phaistos and Malea, a disturbing pattern emerged. These palaces weren't just abandoned. They were violently and simultaneously destroyed around 1450 BCE. The evidence was etched into the very stones, layers of ash, intense fire that cracked the limestone, and valuable treasures left buried in the rubble. The initial theory was invasion. Perhaps the warlike Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, whose citadels were heavily fortified, saw their chance and attacked. But this theory had holes. Why was the destruction so uniform across the entire island? And what explained the strange, non-military evidence? The thick, ubiquitous layer of fine, gray ash. The mystery deepened. The killer, it seemed, was not human. The clues were pointing away from Crete to a small crescent-shaped island, 70 miles to the north. The island of Thera. The evidence on Crete was a puzzle, but the final, terrifying piece of the mystery was waiting on a neighboring island, buried under a mountain of volcanic rock. Modern Santorini is a tourist paradise, its whitewashed villages perched on dramatic cliffs. But those cliffs are the inside wall of a volcano. A volcano that, in the 17th century BCE, was not an island, but a single, massive mountain. In the 1960s, excavations on Thera began, and what they found was a Minoan time capsule. A settlement named Akrotiri was discovered, buried not in destructive lava, but in preserving ash, much like Pompeii. Here were multi-story homes, their walls adorned with the same vibrant frescoes found on Crete. The Minoans were here, living prosperously on Thera. Then, the digging revealed the cataclysm. Geological samples told a horrifying story. Thera wasn't just a volcano, it was a supervolcano. When it erupted, it did so with an almost unimaginable force, 4 times more powerful than the Krakatoa eruption of 1883. The mountain didn't just spew lava, it vaporized. It collapsed in on itself, creating the vast caldera we see today. The Minoans on Thera had minutes, maybe seconds. The ground would have shaken violently, then the sky would have turned black. For them, the end was swift. For their families on Crete, it was just the beginning of a long, slow death. The collapse of the volcano into the sea was the trigger for the final act. The displacement of such a colossal volume of rock and water generated a mega tsunami. Imagine the scene on the northern coast of Crete. First, an earthquake, violent enough to topple buildings. Then a sound, a deep, growing roar from the sea. The water along the coastline dramatically receded, pulling fish onto dry land. Then, on the horizon, a dark line appears. Not into a wave, but into a wall of water over 100 feet high. This liquid mountain would have slammed into the northern coast of Crete. The Minoan fleet, the source of their empire's power, was shattered instantly. Coastal towns, villages, and fertile farmland were scoured from the map. But the water was only the first blow. Next came the air. The eruption column, towering miles into the sky, began to rain down ash. For days, a blizzard of fine, abrasive, and toxic volcanic material fell on Crete. It buried the eastern half of the island, smothering fields, clogging rivers, and collapsing roofs under its weight. The ash poisoned the soil, rendering it infertile for a generation. Then the sunlight faded, and a volcanic winter descended. Crippled and starving, the Minoans were on their knees. And from the north, their rivals, the Mycenaeans, were watching. They saw the smoke, felt the tremors, and recognized an opportunity. With the Minoan navy destroyed, the sea road to Crete was open. Evidence at Knossos shows a final violent conflagration. The Mycenaeans marched in and took what was left. But their conquest was more than just looting and burning. They performed the ultimate erasure. They moved into the labyrinth itself. They took the Minoan administrative system, the clay tablets, and did something profound. They scratched out the Minoan language, Linear A, and began writing in their own script. Linear B, an early form of Greek that we can read. The Minoans weren't just conquered. Their voice, their identity, their very history was systematically overwritten by their conquerors. This is the final, chilling twist. The Minoans didn't just vanish. They were silenced. Their story was erased, and replaced with someone else's. The story of the Minoans is not just an ancient mystery. It is a permanent, sobering lesson in the fragility of civilization. The same geological forces that destroyed them are still active today. Thera is still a live volcano, slowly rebuilding itself in the heart of the caldera. We build our modern megacities on fault lines, along coastlines, in the shadow of volcanoes, believing in our own permanence. The Minoans likely felt the same. Their art shows people confident, joyful, and seemingly secure in their world. They were wrong. Their fate asks us an urgent question. Are we prepared for the day when the ground beneath our feet, or the sea at our doorstep, decides to remind us who is truly in charge? The Minoans are a ghost in our history, a whisper from the past. Their story is a warning, written not in stone, but in its absence. A warning that every civilization, no matter how golden its age, is just one day away from vanishing.